I'm talking about butt joints.
Butt joints are the simplest means of joining two components together. Normally long grain to long grain like this, but you can do end grain to end grain. Components should be prepared so that they match well, and 99% of the time that will be so the surfaces are flat. No mechanical locking of the components is made in the joinery. Good contact across the whole mating area is really important for a strong joint, even if you're using a gap filling glue. Long grain to long grain glues really well. End grain to end grain can have some problems, and I hope to demonstrate that. I've prepared this piece of poplar by planing the long edges, the ends, and also the faces. We're going to be joining the edges together and the ends together.
So the first thing I've got to do is cut this into 4 pieces. So here are my 4 pieces. They're the same length as they are wide. So all our joints are going to be the same length, so they'll be very good for comparison. Now I'm going to glue the end grains that are prepared, planed nice and flat together on those 2, clamp it, and on these 2 I'm going to glue the planed edges together. Once they're cured, we'll test the relative strength of each of them. Just a regular DIY store white carpenter's glue. Enough glue to get coverage on every part of the joint. Put those together. Same with the long grain. So I'll leave those to dry overnight and we'll test their strength tomorrow. So it's a new day. They've had 20 hours to dry and cure, and we should be able to test how strong they are. So I've got the joint piece clamped to the bench nice and firmly there. The actual joint is hanging off the edge of the bench. I've clamped on a batten which has got notches on it every inch, and I'm using these scales to see how much force I'm putting to break the joint off, or break the piece of wood. We'll see what goes first. Now I'm sorry about the exposure level I've had to use here, just so that the numbers are clear on the scales. Okay, so this is 2 inches away from the joint, and it's the end grain butt joint. So that's clearly broken, and it's broken cleanly on the glue line. So the wood hasn't broken at all, it is the glue joint that's broken. So now I'll set up with the glue joint, which is along the grain. And we're starting at the 2-inch position, which was where the end grain one broke. I'm just hoping I will be able to read off the values when I come back to edit this. Now that's broken, and I think you can see it's broken the wood rather than the glue joint. So the end grain butt joint broke at the glue line, and there's glue left on both surfaces. The butt joint along the grain, that actually broke through the wood, and the actual glue joint itself is still intact.
That shows pretty clearly that end grain to end grain butt joints break at the joint line, whereas long grain to long grain joints, the wood fails first. And that holds true for most woods, except for those that are poor at taking glue, such as very dense or oily woods.
So how do you produce a good butt joint? Well, you've got to prepare your material straight and flat so you get good contact area between both pieces. If it comes to doing end grain, then you want to use a shooting board and use a plane to plane that nice and flat, nice and straight, and nice and clean. When it comes to gluing the pieces together, you want to apply glue to here and press it in with your finger, leave it for a little while, perhaps a minute or so, to soak in as much as it can, then reapply glue again on both pieces before putting them together. For long grain joints, prepare them straight and flat. If you want the panel that you produce to be flat as well, then prepare those at 90 degrees, or prepare them using the butterfly method, where you fold them on each other and plane the two together so that when they're opened out, any inaccuracies in the angle you plane at will be cancelled out. One option is to produce what's called a spring joint, where rather than having perfectly straight pieces that join together, you have a slight concavity in each one of them, so that when the ends are nice and tight together, you have a gap through the centre of no more than about the thickness of a piece of paper, about 3/1000 of an inch. The theory goes that when you clamp it together, you put enough pressure on to pull it closed in the middle, and that creates compression at the ends. When they dry out, which they will dry out quicker than the centre, they'll want to contract, but because they're under compression at the moment, as they contract, they don't actually get any smaller, and so you don't end up with cracks forming. Now, I've built a lot of panels using butt joints, and I've never had them come apart at the ends, whether I prepared them perfectly straight or with a spring joint. But it does happen, and you see it on furniture from time to time. Now, I just want to show you this table, which I made in my Get Into Woodworking channel. It's a prototype. It's made entirely out of pallet wood, and the legs are a lamination of two pieces, as are the rails underneath, all butt joints, and the top is laminated from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 separate pieces. They're all butt jointed. It's only 10mm thick, that's 3/8 of an inch. So all butt jointed together, they're all perfectly straight joints, and it hasn't warped at all, hasn't developed any cracks on the edges, and there's no reinforcement, reinforcement in quotation marks. You will hear about reinforcement methods like tongue and grooves, loose tongues, splines, biscuits, dominoes and dowels. They don't actually reinforce a long grain joint like this. What they do, they help with alignment. So if you're having trouble lining boards up when you glue them, and glue joint on long grain to long grain can be very slippery, so for alignment sometimes we'll put something in to stop the parts from moving around. So they can be good for that. But on very thin material, as in this table, if I'd put any such thing like that in there, if it had expanded with the glue and then set, then it would have left a bump on all the glue lines. So it's best not to use it, and it really doesn't need it. It's perfectly sound. And although, because it's so thin, if I sat on this piece here or that piece over there, it's going to break. It won't break on the glue line, it will break through the wood. And of course on these two ends, because it's with the grain, it would support my weight perfectly okay. If it's end grain, that's a different matter. By inserting biscuits and dominoes into end grain butt joints, you're actually creating some long grain to long grain glue surfaces. Pretty much you're producing a mortise and tenon joint, and so you are increasing the strength. Well, I hope you found that useful. Join me next time as I discuss another joint. Cheerio!